Morgan Collins stared through the barred windows of the transport van as it approached Lakeside Women's Correctional Facility. 23, she never imagined her life would take such a devastating turn. The 3-year sentence for a crime she committed in a moment of desperation now loomed before her like an insurmountable mountain. The van slowed as it approached the imposing facility, surrounded by layers of chain-link fence topped with razor wire that glinted menacingly in the afternoon sun. Morgan's wrists ached from the handcuffs that bound them together, a physical reminder of her new reality. "End of the line, ladies," the transport officer announced as the van came to a stop. "Welcome to your new home." Morgan followed the other. New arrivals through processing, a dehumanizing ritual of searches, paperwork, and institutional clothing distribution. The harsh fluorescent lights cast everyone in a sickly pallor, accentuating the dark circles under Morgan's blue eyes. Her once vibrant blonde hair hung limp around her shoulders before it was unceremoniously pulled back for her mugshot. "Collins, Monsieur Prisoner, Nadir 87435, the intake officer droned, handing her a stack of prison-issued items. "You'll be in Block D. Officer Reynolds will escort you." Morgan clutched her new belongings and turned to find a female guard waiting by the doorway. Officer Reynolds cut an imposing figure in her crisp uniform, her posture ramrod straight. She appeared to be in her late 20s, with her dark hair pulled back into a severe bun that emphasized her sharp cheekbones and serious expression. "Let's go, Collins," Officer Reynolds said, her voice surprisingly soft despite her stern demeanor. As they walked through the labyrinthine corridors of the facility, Morgan studied the guard from the corner of her eye. Unlike some of the other officers she'd encountered during processing, Officer Reynolds didn't seem to wield her authority like a weapon. There was something different about her, a quiet dignity that commanded respect without resorting to intimidation. "First time?" Officer Reynolds asked, breaking the silence. Morgan nodded, unable to trust her voice. "Keep your head down. Follow the rules, and you'll be fine," the officer advised. "Not everyone is here to make your life miserable, but don't mistake kindness for weakness either." They arrived at Block D, a cavernous space filled with 2-person cells arranged in tiers. The cacophony of voices, the clang of metal doors, and the pervasive smell of industrial cleaner assaulted Morgan's senses. "You're in cell 42, top tier. Your cellmate is Vasquez. She's been here for 2 years, keeps to herself mostly." "Officer." Reynolds gestured towards the stairs. "Dinner's at 6. Orientation is tomorrow morning at 9. As Morgan climbed the stairs, she felt the weight of eyes following her, both those of the inmates sizing up the newcomer and, she realized with a flush of warmth, those of Officer Reynolds watching to ensure she reached her destination safely. The next few weeks passed in a blur of routines, rules, and adjustments. Morgan learned to navigate the complex social hierarchy of the prison, finding a relatively safe position by keeping to herself and speaking only when necessary. She discovered quickly that showing any weakness was dangerous, but appearing too strong could invite challenges she wasn't prepared to face. Officer Reynolds was assigned to Block D for the day shift, and Morgan found herself observing the guard whenever possible. She noticed how Officer Reynolds treated the inmates with a firm but fair hand, never engaging in the power trips that some guards seemed to enjoy. She learned that the officer's first name was Alexandra, though the inmates respectfully referred to her as Officer Reynolds or sometimes just Reynolds. During yard time one afternoon, Morgan was sitting alone on a bench when a confrontation broke out between 2 inmates near the basketball court. Before it could escalate into a full-blown fight, Officer Reynolds intervened, stepping between the women with a calm authority that diffused the situation without calling for backup. "That's why Reynolds is one of the good ones," Vasquez commented, unexpectedly joining Morgan on the bench. "She doesn't make everything into a power play. Ela seems different," Morgan agreed. Vasquez gave her a knowing look. "Yeah, well, don't get any ideas. Reynolds keeps it professional. The last inmate who developed a crush on her got herself transferred to solitary for trying to get too friendly." Morgan felt her cheeks burn. "I wasn't—" "Sure you weren't," Vasquez chuckled. "Just some friendly advice, Rumi. Admire from a distance." The warning should have been enough, but Morgan couldn't help but notice Alexandra Reynolds more and more, the way she tucked stray strands of hair behind her ear when she thought no one was looking. the slight softening of her expression when she spoke to elderly inmates, the barely perceptible smile that sometimes appeared when she was passing out mail with good news from home. One evening, Morgan was working her assigned job in the prison library when Officer Reynolds entered. The library was usually empty at this hour, with most inmates returning to their cells or attending the limited recreational activities available. "Collins," Officer Reynolds nodded in acknowledgement. "I didn't know you worked in the library." "Just started last week," Morgan replied, carefully reshelving a worn paperback. "I used to work in a bookstore before." She trailed off, gesturing vaguely at their surroundings. "What was your favorite section?" Alexandra asked, surprising. Morgan with the personal question. "Contemporary fiction, I guess, but I read almost anything." Morgan hesitated, then added, "What about you? Do you like to read?" For a moment, she worried she'd crossed some invisible line with the personal question, but Officer Reynolds's expression remained open. "Mystery novels, mostly, though lately I've been trying to broaden my horizons." She ran her fingers along the spines of the books on a nearby shelf. "Any recommendations?" Their conversation flowed unexpectedly easily, centered around books and authors, never straying into personal territory. When another guard appeared at the library entrance, Officer Reynolds straightened, her professional demeanor slipping back into place. "Thanks for the suggestions, Collins. I'll check them out." She departed with a nod, leaving Morgan with a strange flutter in her chest that she tried desperately to ignore. Days later, Morgan found a dog-eared copy of one of the books she'd recommended on her bunk when she returned from her work assignment. There was no note, nothing to indicate where it had come from. But she knew, as she opened the cover and saw a small, almost imperceptible AR written in the corner. She felt something dangerous take root within her. Hope. The prison library became their sanctuary. Twice a week, Morgan's shift would coincide with Officer Reynolds' patrol route, creating brief windows of conversation that both women began to anticipate. They were careful, never speaking for too long, maintaining appropriate distance, keeping their discussions centered around literature. But beneath the surface of their seemingly innocuous interactions, something deeper was developing. "I finished that Ishiguro novel," Alexandra mentioned one quiet evening, leaning against the checkout desk. "The unreliable narrator threw me for a loop," Morgan smiled, shelving the last of the returned books. "That's what I love about his writing. Nothing is ever quite what it seems on the surface." Their eyes met briefly, and Morgan felt a jolt of understanding pass between them. They weren't just talking about literature anymore. "Sometimes," Alexandra said softly, "the things we think we understand the least make the most sense when we stop trying so hard to categorize them." Before Morgan could respond, the library door opened as another inmate entered. Officer Reynolds straightened, nodded professionally, and continued her rounds. These moments sustained Morgan through the monotony and hardship of prison life. She began keeping a journal, writing down fragments of their conversations, analyzing every word and glance. She knew it was dangerous, both the journal and the feelings it documented, but she couldn't help herself. "You're playing with fire," Vasquez warned her one night after lights out, having noticed the subtle changes in her cellmate's behavior. "Reynolds might seem different, but at the end of the day, she's still a guard. That uniform comes before anything else." "We just talk about books," Morgan protested weakly. "Sure," Vasquez scoffed, "and I'm just here on vacation. Listen, I've been around long enough to see how these things go. Best case scenario, nothing happens and you both move on. Worst case, she loses her job, you lose your privileges, maybe even get time added to your sentence. Is it worth it?" The rational part of Morgan knew Vasquez was right. Whatever she thought she felt for Alexandra, and whatever she imagined Alexandra might feel in return, couldn't possibly outweigh the potential consequences. And yet, when they were together in those brief, stolen moments, rationality seemed like a distant concern. Spring gave way to summer, bringing sweltering heat to the facility. The air conditioning in Block D malfunctioned, leaving the inmates restless and irritable. Tensions ran high, and fights broke out with increasing frequency. During one particularly chaotic lunch period, a violent altercation erupted between rival groups of inmates. Morgan, attempting to stay clear of the conflict, was blindsided by a chair thrown across the cafeteria. As she fell, her head struck the edge of a table opening a gash above her eye. Through the confusion and shouting, she felt strong arms lifting her, guiding her away from the melee. It was Alexandra, her face tight with concern as she escorted Morgan to the infirmary. "You're going to need stitches," Alexandra said, pressing a clean cloth to Morgan's bleeding forehead as they waited for the prison doctor. "Is it bad?" Morgan asked, wincing at the pressure. "Not too deep, but head wounds always bleed dramatically." Alexandra replied, her voice professional but her touch gentle. "You'll have quite the story to tell." "I was hoping to avoid starring in any prison drama," Morgan attempted to joke, despite the pain. Alexandra's lips quirked in a small smile. "Always the quiet ones who end up in the thick of things." Her eyes softened as she carefully brushed Morgan's hair back from the wound. For a heartbeat, her fingers lingered, tracing a path down to Morgan's cheek in a touch that couldn't be mistaken for anything but tender. The moment shattered when the doctor entered, and Alexandra stepped back, resuming her official posture. "I'll wait outside to escort you back to your block, Collins." The incident shifted something between them. In its aftermath, Alexandra seemed to be fighting an internal battle, sometimes maintaining a deliberate distance, other times seeking Morgan out with transparent excuses about checking her wound or following up on an incident report. During one library shift, Morgan was startled when Alexandra appeared after hours, locking the door behind her. "We need to talk," Alexandra said, her voice strained. "About what's happening." Morgan felt her heart race. "I don't know what you mean, Officer Reynolds." "Don't," Alexandra said, almost pleading. "Don't pretend. It's too dangerous for both of us." They stood facing each other, the air between them charged with unspoken feelings. "I can't stop thinking about you," Alexandra finally admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've never crossed the line with an inmate before. I've never wanted to, but with you—" She shook her head. "It's unprofessional. It's unethical. It could cost me my career." "I know," Morgan said softly. "I've tried to ignore it too." "We should stop this now," Alexandra said, though she took a step closer. "The library meetings, the books, all of it. Is that what you want?" Alexandra's breath caught. "What I want doesn't matter. What's right matters. And what if what's right isn't always what's by the book?" Morgan asked, emboldened by the vulnerability she saw in Alexandra's eyes. They stood there, suspended in the moment, until the radio on Alexandra's belt crackled to life, calling for an officer check-in. Reality crashed back around them. "I have to go," Alexandra said, regaining her composure. This conversation never happened, but it had, and they both knew there was no going back. The following weeks brought a new kind of tension, not the discomfort of strangers, but the acute awareness of two people fighting a powerful attraction. They created distance in public, Alexandra going so far as to request occasional shift changes that would take her away from Block D. But their orbits couldn't be kept separate for long in the closed environment of the prison. During a mandatory, facility-wide search, Alexandra was assigned to inspect Morgan and Vasquez's cell. As she methodically went through their belongings, she discovered Morgan's journal hidden beneath her mattress. Their eyes met across the small space, a silent plea passing from Morgan. Without breaking eye contact, Alexandra closed the journal without reading it and returned it to its hiding place, a decision that clearly violated protocol. In that moment, they both recognized the line had been irrevocably crossed. Later that night, a folded note appeared under Morgan's pillow during shift change, a risk so great it left her breathless. "Some stories are worth the risk. Tomorrow library 6 p.m. Morgan knew that attending this meeting would change everything. She had 2 years and 4 months left on her sentence. Alexandra had a career, possibly a life outside these walls that Morgan knew nothing about. Every rational thought told her to stay away, but as lights out was called and darkness fell across the facility, Morgan clutched the note to her chest, already knowing what her decision would be. The library was bathed in the golden light of sunset when Morgan arrived for her shift. Her heart hammered so loudly she was certain everyone could hear it, though the room was empty save for a few inmates finishing their reading before dinner call. She busied herself with menial tasks, reshelving books and straightening chairs, all while watching the clock inch closer to 6. At 5:55, the last inmate left, and Morgan was alone. She paced between the stacks, rehearsing what she might say, wondering if Alexandra would actually come. The prison operated on strict schedules. Officers couldn't simply disappear without explanation. What excuse had Alexandra given? What risks was she taking just to have this conversation? The door opened at precisely 6, and Alexandra slipped inside, securing it behind her. She'd removed her officer's jacket, wearing only the uniform shirt and pants, as if trying to diminish the visible symbols of the power imbalance between them. "We don't have much time," Alexandra said, her voice low and urgent. "I switched patrol routes with Officer Martinez. I have 15 minutes at most." They stood facing each other in the narrow space between two bookshelves, hidden from view of the door's small window. "I shouldn't have asked you to come," Alexandra continued. "This is reckless," Morgan supplied. "Dangerous, impossible, all of the above." Alexandra ran a hand through her hair, which was loose from its usual tight bun. "And yet here I am." "Why?" Morgan asked, needing to hear it spoken aloud. Alexandra's gaze softened. "Because in the 3 years I've worked here, you're the first person who's made me feel seen, not as an officer, not as a uniform, but as Alexandra." She took a tentative step closer. "I don't even know why. We've barely spoken beyond books and prison routines, and yet I know," Morgan whispered. "I feel it too." The air between them seemed to crackle with electricity. Alexandra reached out slowly, her fingers ghosting along Morgan's cheek in a touch so light it might have been imagined. "We can't act on this," Alexandra said, even as her eyes betrayed her words. "You have years left on your sentence. I'd lose my job, possibly face charges myself. What if we just talk? Get to know each other," Morgan suggested, desperately seeking a compromise. "Nothing physical, nothing that crosses that line?" Alexandra gave a sad smile. "Do you really believe we could keep those boundaries? When every fiber of my being wants to—" She stopped herself, shaking her head. "Even these conversations are prohibited. Fraternization with inmates carries severe penalties, regardless of whether it turns physical." "Then why did you come today?" Morgan challenged gently. "Because I needed you to understand that this isn't just some prison fantasy for me. It's not about power or forbidden attraction." Alexandra's voice dropped to a whisper. "It's about you, Morgan. The way your eyes light up when you talk about books you love, how you maintain your dignity in a place designed to strip it away. Your kindness to the older inmates. I see you, and what I see is beautiful." Morgan felt tears prick her eyes. No one had ever looked at her with such genuine admiration before. Not her ex-boyfriends, not her family, who had disowned her after her conviction. To be truly seen, especially here, in this place of invisibility and numbers, was overwhelming. "I don't know what to do," Morgan admitted. "I have 28 months left. That's a lifetime to wait, to pretend." Alexandra glanced at her watch, her expression pained. "I have to go soon." "What happens now?" Morgan asked. "I don't know," Alexandra admitted. The sensible thing would be to request a transfer to another facility, make a clean break. The suggestion felt like a physical blow. "Is that what you want?" "No," Alexandra said firmly, "but I'm scared of what happens if I stay. If we keep orbiting each other like this, someday we'll collide, and the fallout could destroy both our futures." The prison PA system crackled to life, announcing dinner call. Their time was up. "I can't transfer yet," Alexandra said quickly. "Not immediately. It would raise questions. We need to be careful. Think this through." "Meet me again," Morgan pleaded. "One more time to decide what we do." Alexandra hesitated, then nodded. "Next week, same time." She moved toward the door, then paused, turning back. "In the meantime, get rid of that journal. It's evidence that could hurt us both." After she left, Morgan leaned against the bookshelf, her emotions a tumultuous storm. She knew she should heed Alexandra's warning about the journal, but it contained every thought, every feeling she developed over these months. It was a record of her heart's awakening after she thought it had died when the prison doors closed behind her. That night, Morgan lay awake long after lights out, wrestling with her conscience. Vasquez's steady breathing from the bottom bunk provided a rhythmic backdrop to her chaotic thoughts. Was she being selfish, putting Alexandra's career at risk? Was Alexandra right that they should end this before it truly began? The following days passed in excruciating slowness. Morgan saw Alexandra only during routine checks and shift changes, their interactions rigorously professional. If anyone noticed the careful way they avoided each other's eyes, they didn't comment on it. 3 days before their planned meeting, disaster struck. During a random cell inspection, a different guard found Morgan's journal. She returned from her work assignment to find her cell in disarray and the journal missing. Cold dread settled in her stomach as she was escorted to the warden's office. Warden Harris was a stern woman in her 50s who ran the facility with an iron fist beneath a veneer of rehabilitation rhetoric. She sat behind her desk, the journal open before her, as Morgan was led in. "Sit down, Collins," she ordered, dismissing the escorting officer. Morgan sank into the chair, her legs suddenly weak. "Do you know why you're here?" the warden asked. "I assume it's about my journal," Morgan replied, her mouth dry. "Indeed." The warden flipped through the pages. "Quite the creative writer, aren't you? These detailed fantasies about Officer Reynolds are concerning." Morgan's heart raced. Had Alexandra been called in too? Was she already being questioned, her career crumbling because of Morgan's carelessness? "They're just stories," Morgan attempted, her voice wavering. "Fiction. I've always written to escape." "Fiction," the warden repeated skeptically. "With real names, real locations within this facility, and real events that match our security logs." She closed the journal with a snap. "Collins, I've been running prisons for 20 years. I know an inmate crush when I see one. Usually, I'd simply confiscate the materials and issue a warning." She leaned forward. "But what troubles me is the specificity here. These conversations you've documented, these moments between you and Officer Reynolds, they suggest something beyond fantasy." Morgan struggled to keep her expression neutral. "Officer Reynolds has always been kind to all the inmates. I misinterpreted her professionalism. Has she given you books? Met you alone in the library?" The warden pressed. "She recommended books available in the library," Morgan said carefully, "and she does her rounds there, as do all officers." The warden studied her for a long moment. "Officer Reynolds has an exemplary record. She's respected by staff and inmates alike, which is a rare combination in this environment. I would hate to see that record tarnished by inappropriate behavior." "There's been no inappropriate behavior," Morgan insisted, fear giving way to protective instinct. "The journal is my private thoughts, nothing more. Officer Reynolds has always maintained proper boundaries." For what felt like an eternity, the warden simply observed her, as if trying to extract the truth through sheer force of will. Finally, she spoke. "I'm placing you on restricted privileges for 2 weeks for possession of contraband materials. The journal will be confiscated permanently." She tapped a pen against the desk. "As for Officer Reynolds, I'll be speaking with her separately about maintaining appropriate distance from inmates who may develop attachments." Morgan felt simultaneously relieved and terrified. The punishment was relatively light, but the mention of speaking to Alexandra sent fresh waves of anxiety through her. "You're dismissed, Collins. Officer Diaz will escort you back to your block." As Morgan stood to leave, the warden added, "And Collins, I suggest you find a new hobby, one that won't jeopardize anyone's career or your own chances of an early release." The EA's warning was clear. They were being watched now. For a week, Morgan saw nothing of Alexandra. Rumors circulated that Officer Reynolds had taken sudden leave, with some inmates suggesting she'd been fired, others claiming she'd requested transfer. The uncertainty was agonizing. Morgan moved through her restricted routine like a ghost, haunted by the possibility that her carelessness had cost Alexandra everything. When Alexandra finally returned to duty, she was assigned to a different block. Morgan caught glimpses of her during mealtimes and yard periods, but Alexandra never once looked in her direction. The deliberate avoidance hurt more than any confrontation could have. "Told you it would end badly," Vasquez commented one evening, watching Morgan stare after Alexandra's retreating form in the cafeteria. "Though I'm surprised they didn't throw you in solitary. Must be that clean record of yours." Morgan said nothing. She couldn't explain that the pain wasn't from being caught or punished. It was from the silence, from not knowing if Alexandra blamed her, if she was okay, if there was anything left of the connection they'd begun to build. 2 weeks after the journal incident, Morgan was released from restrictions and allowed to return to her library job. On her first shift back, she found a folded piece of paper tucked inside a copy of Pride and Prejudice, the first book Alexandra had borrowed on her recommendation. With trembling fingers, she unfolded the note. "Maintenance closet next to, on library, 7 p.m. It was reckless, possibly a trap, but Morgan couldn't ignore it. At 6:55, she made an excuse about needing to check inventory in the adjacent storage area and slipped into the narrow maintenance closet. 3 agonizing minutes later, the door opened and Alexandra entered, closing it quickly behind her. In the dim light of a single bulb, Alexandra looked exhausted, with dark circles under her eyes and tension etched into her features. Still, seeing her up close after weeks of distance made Morgan's heart race. "We have 5 minutes," Alexandra said without preamble. "I'm covering for Martinez's bathroom break." "Are you okay?" Morgan asked. "I heard rumors. I was suspended." "A pending investigation," Alexandra cut in. "They questioned me about our interactions, searched my apartment." She ran a hand through her hair. "The warden found nothing conclusive. Your journal suggested feelings on your part, but nothing proven on mine. I was reprimanded for failing to report an inmate's inappropriate attachment and warned about maintaining boundaries." Relief washed over Morgan. "So you still have your job?" "For now. I'm on probation. One mistake and I'm done." Alexandra's gaze was intense. "They're watching both of us. That's why I've been keeping my distance." "I'm so sorry," Morgan whispered. "The journal. I should have destroyed it like you said." Alexandra shook her head. "It doesn't matter now. What matters is what we do next." "What can we do?" Morgan asked. "If they're watching us." "I've been offered a transfer to Madison Correctional," Alexandra said quietly. "It's 3 hours away. I told them I needed time to think about it." The news hit Morgan like a physical blow. "You're leaving?" "I don't know," Alexandra admitted. "Part of me thinks it's the only sensible choice. Create distance, let whatever this is between us fade naturally." She gestured between them. "But another part of me," she trailed off, and Morgan finished the thought. "Can't bear the idea of never seeing each other again." They stood in silence, the air heavy with unspoken feelings and impossible choices. "I have something for you," Alexandra finally said. Reaching into her pocket, she pulled out a small piece of paper. "My address for when you get out." Morgan stared at it. "That's over 2 years away." "I know." Alexandra's voice was soft but determined. "But 2 years is nothing compared to never." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I'll take the transfer," Alexandra decided, the words seeming to surprise even her. "I'll go to Madison, finish my probation period, then request reassignment to a different position in the correction system, something that doesn't involve direct supervision of inmates. I'll wait." Morgan felt tears well up. "You'd do that? Wait 2 years for someone you barely know?" Alexandra smiled, a genuine smile that transformed her tired face. "I know enough. I know you're intelligent and resilient. I know you made a mistake that landed you here, but it doesn't define you. I know that in different circumstances, we would have had a real chance." She checked her watch. "I need to go. Take the address, memorize it, then flush it. Don't write to me while you're still in here. It would raise flags. But when you get out—" She hesitated. "If you still want to explore what this could be, I'll be waiting." Morgan took the paper, committing the address to memory before folding it again. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll focus on getting through your sentence cleanly," Alexandra urged. "No more risks, no more contraband, nothing that could extend your time here. And then we start over, properly, as equals. The prospect of a future beyond these walls, a future that might include Alexandra, filled Morgan with a hope she hadn't allowed herself to feel since her sentencing. "Okay," she agreed. 2 years, I can do that." Alexandra nodded, then tentatively reached out, her fingers brushing Morgan's just for a moment. "This is goodbye then, at least for now." The touch, brief as it was, sent electricity through Morgan's veins. "Goodbye, Alexandra." With one last look, Alexandra slipped from the closet, leaving Morgan alone with the piece of paper and a heart full of complicated emotions. True to her word, Alexandra submitted her transfer request the next day. She left Lakeside Women's Correctional Facility 2 weeks later without any further private conversations or meaningful glances. To any observer, Officer Reynolds was simply an employee changing jobs, and Morgan Collins was just another inmate, serving her time. The remaining 2 years of Morgan's sentence stretched before her like an endless road. She threw herself into every rehabilitation program available, education courses, vocational training, therapy sessions. She avoided trouble, accumulated good behavior credits, and focused on becoming someone worthy of the second chance she'd been offered, both in life and in love. She thought of Alexandra often, during quiet moments in the library where they'd first connected, on nights when the stars were visible through the barred windows, whenever she read passages in books that she longed to discuss. But she kept her promise. No journals, no letters, nothing that could jeopardize either of their futures. 26 months later, Morgan stood at the gates of Lakeside, a small bag of possessions in hand, her sentence complete. The world outside seemed enormous and terrifying after years of confinement, but somewhere, in that vast unknown, was an address she'd memorized, and a woman who might still be waiting. She took a deep breath of free air and began walking toward the bus station. She had no guarantees. Alexandra might have moved on, might have changed her mind, might have decided that waiting for an ex-convict was too much to ask of herself. But for the first time since she'd entered those prison gates, Morgan felt something that had been missing for too long. Possibility. 3 days later, standing on a quiet street in a small town she'd never visited before, Morgan raised her hand to knock on a familiar stranger's door, her heart full of both trepidation and hope. Whatever happened next, she knew one thing with certainty. Some connections transcended barriers, some waiting was worthwhile, and sometimes love found a way to begin again. As the door opened, revealing Alexandra's surprised and joyful face, Morgan realized that her sentence hadn't ended her life after all. In the most unexpected place, through the most difficult circumstances, it had led her to its true beginning.